Welcome to the Conversations podcast, where we believe conversations create change. My name is Mike, and I am here with my wife, Steph, and this is episode 1.
Episode number 1.
Babe, how are you feeling?
I'm excited.
Yeah?
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm
Good.
nervous. I think I'm feeling all the feels.
I'm definitely feeling all the feels as well. I'm excited. I'm nervous. This has definitely been stretching for sure.
Yeah,
We have been growing because you're techie.
a little bit.
I am not so techie.
But you're doing a great job. I'm very proud of you.
We're growing. We're figuring out microphones. We're figuring out lighting. We built a podcast studio in a spare bedroom in our home, and we have no idea what we're doing. We're watching YouTube, trying to figure this out. But this is episode 1, and I am super, super excited. We've been planning. We've been praying. We've been thinking about doing this for a really, really long time.
Yeah, we've been preparing for a long time. And I'm just excited that it's done. We're here.
We're here. I'm excited too. The reason I'm excited is because my favorite things to do are always my favorite when we're doing them together.
No.
And it's true, because we've done a lot of life together.
We have.
We met each other when we were extremely young.
Yeah, we were young. We were 16 years old when we met.
16. We were kids.
Yeah,
And here we are all these years later,
I know.
you know? But I love that we have known each other for as long as we have. I feel like we almost kind of grew up together.
Yeah.
And we became best friends throughout the process. But I think it'd be funny for us to maybe talk a little bit about how we first met.
Where we met?
And let's start there. Let's start where we met, because where we met was kind of
Interesting.
different.
Yeah,
We were 16.
Yeah.
And you want to tell them where we met? Or you want me to tell them?
you tell them.
We met at a nightclub. It was crazy.
Okay, so you can't lie.
It was a wild night. I was just hanging out with the dudes, and you just came up to
This is
me.
not true. This is false
It was
information.
crazy. All at 16. It could have been true, though, because you had a fake ID growing up.
Okay, let's not talk about that.
I never had that.
Okay.
You
Let's
come
move
from a
on. We
very-
met at church, y'all.
We did. We met. We met at church. We met at church, which was crazy. I mean, in our world, I guess that's normal, right?
Yeah.
In like the Christian world or whatever. But outside of our world, that seems like a very unconventional
Place to meet. Yep.
place to meet. But what I think is really cool is that the same day that my faith journey started was the same day I met my wife.
Oh,
I didn't know you were going to be my wife then.
I didn't know you were going to be my husband either.
But I have a feeling, I think you told me this once, that when I walked into the church
Are
and
you going to lie again?
and you saw me, you were
Oh
like,
my
oh my
gosh.
goodness, this guy,
I think we have to start over.
I've been praying for him. Like, he's finally
Negative.
here.
That's not what happened. That's not what happened.
Well, what happened? You tell me.
Well, first of all, when you walked into the church, I was the lead actress
Actress?
slash dancer
Okay, actress. Okay, all right.
of the infamous
Okay.
Lifehouse skit.
Yes, you were an actress.
Okay, I
indeed.
was having a moment.
You were doing a play.
But you know what? You got saved as a result of that skit.
I did. I made a decision to follow Jesus, and I didn't turn
Exactly.
back.
Yeah.
And then from there, we became best friends.
We did. We had a platonic friendship. You were dating people. I was dating, and so we just had a friendship.
Yeah, but we had a very deep friendship. Like,
We
we
did.
were really, really good friends.
We were.
I always told you, like, when we were younger, which I don't know if it's good or bad, that to me, you were like one of the guys.
Yes, you told me that all the
'Cause
time.
I would call you and tell you everything.
Yes,
So I would have dates, and I'd call you after the dates and be like, so this is how it went. What do you think?
correct.
You'd be like, thumbs up, thumbs down.
Yeah.
But I love our story. I love the foundation that we've built. And here we are all these years later. I'm a pastor.
Yeah.
You're a therapist.
Can you specify what kind of therapist? Because the other day, remember, so I said, oh yeah, someone asked me what I did. I was like,
Yes.
oh, I'm an entrepreneur, and they're like, oh, but what's your business? I'm like, dang it,
You're a therapist.
I'm a therapist.
Yeah.
And they're like what? Like a massage therapist?
Well, no, like a physical therapist.
Oh my.
You are an LMFT.
Do you know what it stands for?
I do.
What is it?
A licensed marriage and family therapist. Boom.
Hey,
Here we
I know
go.
that.
Yes. Are you proud?
I am.
Yes. And by the way, I'm just super impressed by you because you are brilliant.
No.
You're an incredible therapist.
Mm.
And I'm just grateful to be married to somebody like you.
I love you.
I love you too, baby.
Mhm.
So let's talk about it because we felt like this was the right time
Yeah.
to start a podcast called Conversations.
Yeah.
Right. And I love the tagline of this podcast. It's Conversations Create Change.
Yep.
But I think one of the reasons that we started this podcast is because you and I have some of the best conversations.
We do. We can talk about anything. We could talk about everything.
Yeah, no matter how hard
Yeah.
or no matter how great it is.
Yeah.
It wasn't always like that.
Correct.
It definitely took time.
Yeah.
Therapy,
Yes.
growing, counseling.
It's a skill.
Yeah,
It's
it
a skill
is.
that you didn't grow up with,
Right.
and it's a skill that I didn't grow up
Wait,
with.
but I thought the reason you said you wanted to be with me was because I was an expert communicator in all things relation. Oh, that wasn't it?
Wow.
Okay, I thought that was it. No, but with all seriousness, yeah, we didn't grow up with a solid foundation on what healthy communication looked like in a marriage. And I'm grateful that we're on a journey together,
Yeah.
figuring that out.
Yeah.
And that's why we're launching this podcast, because
right.
we want to hopefully be able to provide a space for people to see what vulnerability looks like.
Yeah.
And hopefully they'll be able to live vulnerable and have great conversations as well that cause them to change their life and grow.
Yeah.
But the tagline I love, it's conversations create change,
Yeah.
which is so powerful. You came up with this tagline years ago when you stepped out in faith and launched your private practice as a therapist.
Yes.
Can you give us the heart behind conversations create change?
Well, when I was launching my private practice, I was really like thinking about what is it that I want to be the foundation of my practice, like this value that I have. And I strongly believe that the quality of our life is strongly impacted by the quality of our relationships.
That's powerful.
Right. And so if our relationships are not good, the chances are that we're not feeling too good.
Right.
Right. And our relationships are nothing if they don't have a foundation of open communication.
Right.
And so I often tell clients, a relationship is a never-ending conversation, and so we have to really develop the skill and the art of communication and having hard conversations and healthy conversations in order for us to have healthy relationships. And so a lot of times we need to be able to have those tough conversations with ourselves, with our spouse, with our friends, with our family, in order for us to sustain change in our life.
Right.
And so that's where the heart came
I
from.
love that.
Conversations is the vehicle that creates change in our life. When we can get together and we can talk about it and we can have a conversation about it, we can be open. I can learn from your story. You can learn from my story. We can be vulnerable. Change starts to happen in our life.
I love that. And I love how you said that the quality of our relationships is built upon the quality of how good we can actually communicate. And I think that's so powerful. What would you say is one characteristic of a healthy conversation? Like, what's one characteristic that a healthy conversation usually has?
Vulnerability.
Okay, let's unpack vulnerability, because I've heard this word a lot.
Yes.
Vulnerability is trending on Instagram and
always
on the TikToks and the YouTube shorts and all the stuff that the kids are doing. The kids.
Okay.
I feel old sometimes,
No, Lord.
But let's unpack this word of vulnerability, because I really do think that in our private conversations, as you and I have began to try and unpack this word, is actually served as a vehicle for health for us.
Yeah.
And it's actually served as a tool for us in how we communicate with one another. Yeah. How would you define vulnerability?
Vulnerability is the ability for us to allow someone else to truly see us. It's when we take the mask off. It's when we are radically honest about who we are, what we're feeling, what we're experiencing, our inner world. It's allowing someone into your inner world and allowing them to see you for who you really are. Because most of us, we walk around with a curated version of ourselves. We walk around with a mask on. When we're at work, we have to be professional. When we're around certain people, we have to say the right thing. We can't do the wrong thing. We have to present in a certain way.
Right.
And so vulnerability is the ability for us to really allow ourselves to be seen. The good, the bad, the ugly, the intrusive thoughts, the crazy thoughts, the emotions that we feel. It's allowing someone into our inner world and allowing them to see us.
I love that. That's so powerful. When I think about what you just said, for me, I think it's a key to freedom.
Yeah.
I feel like vulnerability can keep us trapped in a prison.
Yep.
That we only have the key, to get out, So for me, I guess I would when I hear you talk about vulnerability, what comes to mind is allowing people to see us for who we really are without the fear of judgment
Right.
of their opinions or what they
good.
might think of us as a result.
Yeah.
You know, because I think if we're not careful, we can live fake lives out of fear that people are going to judge us for who we really are.
Yeah. And honestly, that's a projection.
Mm.
You know, a lot of times we are so self-critical that we project that criticism on other people, and we think that everyone else is criticizing us the way that we're criticizing ourselves. You know, and so then we put on the shield, and then we present with the kind of person we think we are or we wish to be, and not who we actually are in that present moment.
Yeah.
You know, with our hurts, our hang-ups,
Right.
you know, our mess-ups, with the things that we still have to work on, but instead we show up curated.
Yeah.
You know, and so that creates distance, that creates an inauthentic way of being, an inauthentic way of living.
Right.
You know, that creates distance in our relationships because there's no true vulnerability there.
Yeah. I love that. I think the reason that vulnerability is so powerful too is because it can integrate into any part of our life.
Yeah.
Like vulnerability is not just about conversation.
Right.
Vulnerability is the ability to live out who you truly are.
Yes.
And when we don't live from a place of vulnerability, I wonder how many times we set ourselves back from stepping into what God might want to do for us
Yeah.
out of fear of somebody's opinion or out of, like you said, us being self-critical.
Yeah.
I'm even thinking about this podcast for a second. Like we have
Ooh,
been,
let's get real.
yeah, there has been some fear
Oh, so
around
much
us
fear.
launching this podcast.
Yeah.
You know, fear of our own expectations
Yeah.
and fear of our own level of quote unquote excellence or perfection.
Yeah.
Obviously, we have fear that is the content that we put out, is it going to be any good?
Yeah.
Are the people going to think that it's any good? What are going to be the opinions of people as we're putting this out?
Yeah. And it's exposing. It feels exposing, which is what vulnerability
Right.
feels like. It feels like, you know, you're standing there and everyone's like looking at you, like looking at who you really are, your inner being.
Right.
And then you're opening up yourself up to criticism.
It's
you
like
know?
this one time when I did karaoke.
Oh, God. It's my favorite thing to do.
Well, I know karaoke is your favorite thing to do. Like you will sing.
Should we do it right now?
No, we please. We need to protect the 2 listeners that we have right now. We're trying to build an audience.
We don't want to lose our listeners.
No,
Okay.
no. The only, God loves it when you sing.
Do you love it when I sing?
No, I don't. There's many other.
That's so mean.
Well, we got to be vulnerable. We have to be honest in our conversations. And
I will never find it.
No, please don't. It's okay. You don't have to. You don't have to do that. Anyways, let's continue, please, because you're throwing me off track. And I felt like we were actually, helping ourselves and also helping other people. Oh, karaoke.
Yes.
So it reminds me of this one time when I went to do karaoke. Which is your favorite thing to do? You will do karaoke in front of everyone, no matter who's watching.
There's no shame in it.
And I am the complete opposite. I will not get up and sing in front of a group of strangers until there was this one time where I went to a karaoke bar. I was so terrified. My friends pushed me to sing karaoke.
Wow, I wasn't there. I'm so jealous.
I know, you should be. And I sang from the top of my lungs and I looked
What did you
crazy.
sing?
Don't stop believing.
Okay.
Hold on to that feeling.
Judge me.
Well, I'm way better than you are. But it was so free, not caring what people thought.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking about maybe even some of the people on our podcast today who maybe they have a dream, a desire, something they want to step out and do.
Yeah.
But because of their fear of self-judgment
Yeah.
or fear of what others might think of them, they're not willing to put themselves in a vulnerable position.
Yeah.
To just step out and
Yeah.
and see what God might want to do. Can you think of where maybe it's been difficult for you to be vulnerable outside of our marriage?
Oh, okay. We're going to go there. Okay. Yes. I think in the past, something that or an area in my life that I think I've struggled with in being vulnerable, I think was in friendships. Actually, when I think about it, I think it was in most of my relationships. I grew up with this, I think it's a very cultural belief, where you have to keep your cards close to your chest. You can't tell people what you're going through, you don't talk about your marital problems with anyone,
We don't have any of those. Anyways, keep going.
Oh, please.
Guess we'll talk about that in the next episode. Anyways.
Okay. Like don't you got to keep your life very private. And so that withheld me from being open. I was taught, and it wasn't overtly taught to me. This is very much a cultural belief, and something that was instilled in me from a very young age, is that vulnerability is weakness. So showing my emotions, showing what I actually felt, showing the things that I actually struggled with was a sign that you were not strong enough.
Wow.
And for me, I had to be strong. So, whenever people would ask me, how are you doing? Or, what's going on in your life? I had a really hard time being completely open about it, in my friendships, just being afraid, of their judgment and their criticism. And I always felt like I had to be the strong one. And so I didn't allow anyone to help carry my burdens.
Wow.
And so that's why we're so blessed now that we've got some incredible close friends where we can be so incredibly vulnerable with that. When they ask me, Steph, how are you doing? I'd tell them, honestly, I'm a hot mess today. I'm ruminating on these thoughts, or I'm struggling with this, thing in my heart, or I'm thinking about this that happened, or, I'm struggling right now. And I know that they're not going to judge me. I know that they're going to help carry my burden. And I've freed myself from that mentality. But it's taken me so many years to get here, because I had to change my perspective around what vulnerability was, and that it's actually the most courageous thing that I can do.
That's powerful. Yeah, I love what you just said. And I think one of the things that you said that stuck out to me was a lot of people think vulnerability is weakness.
Yeah.
And I think you and I are both in positions by God's grace where we get to lead.
Yeah.
We get to lead a group of people. You're leading in your career. I'm a leader at a church. You also lead at a church. And oftentimes I think leaders struggle with the concept of vulnerability.
Yeah.
Because so often strength and perfection and excellence are words that are usually attached to being a leader. And very rarely is vulnerability a word that's attached to leadership. In fact, I don't think I've ever heard a leadership talk on, all right, point number 1 on how to be a great leader.
Be vulnerable.
Be vulnerable.
No.
But it's so true though.
Yeah.
Right? Because I think vulnerability opens up the hearts of those that you're doing life and relationship with, whether you're leading them or whether it's a peer-to-peer relationship. And when I think about friends, for instance, I've noticed that the reason that a lot of people aren't vulnerable is simply because they haven't been exposed to what true vulnerability is.
Yeah.
And I'm grateful that you and I have been gifted exposure.
Yeah.
And we have been gifted with environments where we can learn what true vulnerability actually is.
Yeah. But, we've been exposed, but we've also been intentional at creating it.
Right.
Because I would imagine there's people listening that is like, well, I don't have those kind of people. We didn't just stumble upon them. We were intentional. We really tried to create a community for ourselves.
Right.
In order, and obviously use wisdom and discernment on who is a safe person. People have to earn the right to your vulnerability.
Right.
You can't be reckless and just open up to anybody and everybody, because not everyone has the emotional intelligence and capacity to hold space for you, but you have to be intentional in putting yourself in a position where you're creating that community for yourself, looking for those friendships, being that friend that, you can be vulnerable with.
100%.
Oh, sorry. And
Yep.
you were saying something about leadership, which is interesting, that we don't often hear people talk about vulnerability in association with leadership. And yet it takes a lot of vulnerability for leaders to lead, because leadership is exposing of all the things that you struggle with on the inside. And eventually all those things will come out.
Right.
If you're not a healthy leader.
Well, leadership will always magnify your strengths and magnify your weaknesses.
Yeah.
And you have to be okay with a leader when those areas are highlighted, especially the ones that when you're weak. And I think the reason that vulnerability is such a it's such a code. I feel like it's a cheat code because I feel like vulnerability exposes your weakness but builds you to strength.
Yes.
Right? Because when you admit oh yeah, I'm vulnerable in this area, or I'm weak in this area,
Or I'm powerless.
I'm powerless in this area, right? Well, number one, we actually believe that there's a spiritual principle in this, right?
Yeah.
Where you come before the Lord and it's like, I'm broken. There's a word that says that in your weakness, I'm strong. So God's strength is made perfect in our weakness.
Yep.
Oftentimes our weakness is an invitation for God's power into our life when we tell God, hey, we need you in this area. But it's also a great opportunity for accountability.
Yes.
So when I can tell my friends, hey, I'm weak in this area, I can have friends who can build me, hold me accountable, push me forward, and help me to grow.
Absolutely.
So I think vulnerability is such a cheat code for finding strength. And I think if we're having a hard time finding friendships with vulnerability, since we're on the concept of leading, I think we've got to lead with vulnerability.
Yeah, of course.
I can't wait for someone to be vulnerable for me to be vulnerable.
Correct.
Right? If you want great friends, you got to be a good friend.
Yeah.
And sometimes vulnerability is one of these areas where we have to lead in.
Yeah.
And I think that when we get over the fear of it, we're going to experience healing on the other side.
I love that. Well, you asked me, so now I'm going to ask you.
Oh.
Yeah. In what areas do you think you've struggled with vulnerability outside of our marriage?
I think a little bit of what we talked about already as far as like just being a pastor.
Yeah.
You know, when you're a pastor, you're always in front of people. You're on stage.
Yeah.
And if you're not careful, this is kind of a weird thing to say. I'm a little nervous as to how it's going to come out. But if you're not careful as a pastor, you can always put yourself in environments where you're celebrated.
Yeah.
You know, because you're the guy on stage or you're the guy who's preaching or whatever. And then so often there's people with great intentions who love you and they come up to you and like, great message, or thank you so much, or thank you so much, or thank you so much. And I think sometimes as a pastor, I can forget that although I'm leading the church, I'm also still very much a part of it.
Yeah.
You know, so I want to put myself in positions where I'm bleeding with those who are bleeding.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I never want to lead from a place of I got this all together. You know, so that's been a journey.
Well, and it's also hard because people have this unrealistic expectations of leaders and people like pastors, you know, that they have to be perfect or that they have their life together, that they're, you know, always, you know, coming from the best place, and they forget their humanity.
Yeah.
You know, and so in that, you can create what I think we've talked about this before, like the concept of curated vulnerability. And we see that a lot in spaces like churches, you know, where, you know, you open up enough where you think you know the person, but you really don't. And there's not enough radical honesty, you know, in those types of positions, you know, whether it's a CEO, a pastor, someone in a high leadership capacity, where they can just lead with that type of vulnerability.
Right. I love that so much. Okay. I want to take a moment and I want to talk about vulnerability in marriage, because I feel that vulnerability in our marriage has been extremely healing for me.
Yeah.
You know, and obviously I realize that I'm blessed to have a spouse who's a safe person for me to disclose and open up about when I'm struggling.
Yeah.
So I think of like one of the most, not necessarily so recent, but one of the most impactful moments that we've had in our marriage is when we've finally took an opportunity to like completely tackle my ADHD.
Yeah.
You know, I have been an ADHD kid my whole life.
Yeah.
And maybe we should even like set an episode to talk about
absolutely.
trauma, ADHD, you know, that whole deal and how it ties together. But I feel like my entire life, at least for the most part, like growing up, I found ways to cope.
Yeah.
You know, like I was obviously in school, I was always an athlete. There was always this outlet. And then as I got older, pressure got heavier.
Yeah.
It started to it started to deepen the cracks that I had in my soul that were not yet healed.
Yeah.
And then for the first time, I started feeling the effects of my ADHD. I started having panic attacks out of nowhere. I never had any of those.
Yeah.
I felt like I couldn't think right. I felt like my brain was in a fog. I was having highs and I was having lows. I just didn't feel like myself.
Yeah, I remember you describing that time like you almost felt like your brain was breaking.
I felt like my brain was breaking.
Yeah,
You know?
that was heartbreaking.
Yeah, it was. It was hard. And I remember we were having a conversation in your office, and for such a long time I was trying to hold it together, and in that office I broke.
Yeah.
I broke. And I think it was such a moment of healing for me because I didn't want to break.
Yeah.
And I did. And you held me, you hugged me, you prayed with me, and you encouraged me. But I think that moment pushed me into directions that I needed to go in order to grow.
Yeah.
And I started getting coaching, accountability. I started seeing a therapist in my life.
Yeah.
And it's vulnerability. That moment of vulnerability radically changed my trajectory.
It set you free.
And it set me free in where I'm going.
Yeah.
And it's a process. Like, I'm still growing from that area.
Yeah.
So I'm not 100% on the other side of it.
Yeah.
But I'm grateful that I'm taking the steps forward.
It's a journey. Healing is a journey.
Right.
You know, and I think that vulnerability was the first step. And it wasn't just that you were vulnerable with me, but vulnerability has to start with you. Oftentimes we have a hard time looking in the mirror and being in acceptance of who we are right now, the things that we struggle with right now. And so a lot of times people are not vulnerable, not just because they don't want to be, but a lot of times it's because they actually have a hard time connecting to their own internal experience. And because they're having a hard time connecting to their own internal experience, there's no way I can let you into mine. I don't even know what's going on inside of me, you know? And so what was powerful about that moment is that you were honest with yourself. Oh, wait a second. I might be struggling with this, and this might be impacting me a lot more than I've wanted to realize.
Well, can you take an opportunity to also talk about, as a therapist, from your perspective, how does vulnerability actually help our mental health?
Yeah. So it's so powerful because we are wired as human beings, we are wired for connection. And connection is an essential need that we have as individuals. Connection cannot happen without vulnerability. And so vulnerability is what drives our connection. And when we are connected, then we can start things like healing, and we can start processing, and we can start making sense of our experience. But vulnerability is what causes us to feel that sense of deepening connection. And so it's so powerful for our mental health because it gives us an opportunity, number one, to look inward and be in acceptance of the things that we need help with. And then when we know what we need help with, then we can articulate it and bring it out and say, man, I need help with this. You know, but it takes vulnerability to see that, you know, to actually like look at myself in the mirror and see the hurts, the hangups, the things that I actually need help with, and then bring that in the presence of a safe person that can drive that sense of connection.
I love that. Yeah, and you can't find healing for who you pretend to be. You can only be healed of who you actually are.
Correct, yeah.
So I love how vulnerability not only impacts our mental health, but it even impacts our spiritual life in a drastic and dramatic way. In fact, I really think that vulnerability is one of the foundational pieces as to how to live our Christian faith.
Yeah.
When I think about Jesus, for instance, I mean, we were talking about leadership. I mean, we're talking about the best leader of all time here, who literally changed the world with 12 disciples.
Yeah.
And thousands of years later, there are millions of people on the planet, on our globe, following Jesus, you know? But I think one of the things that Jesus did so well was that he lived a life of vulnerability.
Yeah.
So let's talk about this for a second. We believe that Jesus is God in the flesh. So there's a moment, there's a night before the crucifixion of Jesus where Jesus is so overwhelmed by the fact that crucifixion is coming that he goes to a garden. The garden was called Gethsemane. And he goes with a group of his friends, his disciples. And we have God in the flesh being vulnerable in front of people that he created.
Yeah.
Oftentimes we think that we can only be vulnerable with people who are further along in life than we are.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I'm only going to go to this guy. I'm only going to go to a millionaire for advice on how to make money, or I'm only going to go to this person who has this level of success, you know. But here we have Jesus breaking in front of people that he created and formed.
Yeah.
So much so that he tells his disciples, hey, I'm under so much sorrow that I need you to pray for me.
Yeah.
And scripture says that he was under so much sorrow that he began to sweat drops of blood, which is actually a medical condition that can happen when you're under so much stress and anxiety that the blood vessels in your face literally begin to burst. This is the pressure that Jesus was under.
Yeah.
And he told his disciples, I'm under so much pressure that I need your prayer. I need your friendship. I need your help. And I need you to be here with me.
Mm.
And as a result, the Bible says that Jesus was ministered to and he received strength.
Yeah.
So when I think about our spiritual life, right, it's growth is never linear.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's circular.
Yeah.
And especially when you're growing in a rhythm that's circular, where it can feel like you're going forward and then going backwards, but then you're going forward, and then it feels like you're going backwards, but you're actually going forward. It's so essential to have people around you who can carry you through that process.
Yeah.
Right?
100%.
So I think as we're coming to a close on this podcast, I think one of the things that I'm hoping that our listeners are leaving with today is the power of vulnerability, understanding it, but also thinking through who are the people in their life that they can actually be vulnerable with. Because sometimes we think we have no one in our corner.
Yeah.
But if we take inventory, we might be surprised at the amount of people that we have who are willing to support us on this journey.
Yeah. But we have to be willing to take the first step.
Yep.
You know, so my number one encouragement would be like, it would be so simple. You know, sometimes we try to make things so complicated when the answer is really so simple. So a good first step would be next time that one person that you know that is safe, they're non-judgmental, non-critical, you know, they're a kind person in your life. Next time they ask you, how are you? Be honest. Be radically honest.
Right.
Say, actually, I'm not doing so good. Or today I'm not feeling my best. Or man, I've been struggling with this and I'm so glad that you're asking me how I'm doing. Can I be honest for a moment? You know, because sometimes like we work ourselves up and it's like, well, but how do I even start to be vulnerable? You start being vulnerable by being honest.
Right. I love it. So final thought. I love what you just said. Take the step.
Yeah.
Take the step.
I think you have to lean into the discomfort. It's not going to be comfortable.
That's a word right there. Lean into the discomfort.
Yeah, because it's not going to be a comfortable thing.
Right.
You know, so don't try to wait until you feel better about it. You just have to do it, lean into the discomfort of it and take that step. And as you do it, the more you do it, the better you will feel, the more, you know, authentic it will feel. But at first, it's not going to feel too good. Yeah. You know, but you just got to get it done.
I love it. Well, I love you. I'm so grateful for this conversation. I'm grateful for this episode of Conversations.
Our first episode. Did we just do it?
We just did it. I can't believe that we just actually did this. But I'm so grateful for the journey that we're about to embark on. And I'm also extremely grateful for all those who are listening, for all those who are watching.
Yes.
Know that we love you. We believe in you. We believe your best days are in front of you. But do us a favor. Join in on the conversation. Subscribe to our channel. Follow us on Instagram so you can join us on the conversation with Mike and Steph. We love you, and we'll see you next time.